11 days after my company crossed a $1.12 billion valuation, my mother sent me 6 words. Sunday, 6 o'clock, don't embarrass us. There was no congratulations, no question about whether I was free, no acknowledgement that she had ignored my last 3 calls and answered exactly one of my messages in the previous year. Just an instruction, polished down to the tone she had used when I was 14 and forgot to bring a casserole dish home from school. I was standing in a glass conference room 32 floors above downtown Seattle when the text arrived. Outside, rain had turned Elliott Bay the color of brushed steel. Inside, my employees were still taking pictures beside a ridiculous silver balloon shaped like the number 1, because the funding announcement had pushed Vector Harbor Security past the billion-dollar mark that morning. My chief operating officer, Marcus Grant, saw my face change. Press problem. I locked my phone and put it face down. Family. He winced. Marcus had been with me for 8 years. He knew that one word covered more territory than any breach report we had ever written. What he didn't know was that, for the first time in 11 years, I had been hoping my family would call. Not because I missed them. Missing someone and wanting access to them are not the same thing. I had learned that difference slowly. I had been waiting because 5 months earlier, through a holding company none of them associated with me, I had quietly become the majority owner of my sister's failing business. And inside that business, in a warehouse archive scheduled for destruction, I had found proof that my parents had not merely taken my first company from me 11 years ago. They had manufactured the story that I gave it away. My name is Rachel Donovan. I'm 38 years old, and for most of my adult life, my family's favorite version of me was the one who failed. It made them comfortable. The successful version made them hungry. That Sunday invitation told me hunger had finally won. I grew up outside Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a family where love was rarely spoken directly. Love was demonstrated through usefulness. My father, Martin Donovan, owned Donovan Facilities Group, a regional company that installed commercial access systems, cameras, fire panels, and building controls. If a factory needed badge readers or a hospital needed a security retrofit, my father wanted the contract. He was good at it, better than good. He could walk into a room full of skeptical men, remember every child's name, ask one precise question about cash flow, and leave with a signed agreement. At home, he used the same skill set. Dinner was where performance reviews happened. My older sister, Kendra, learned early that approval came from anticipating him. She studied communications, came back after college, and joined the company's sales department. She knew which clients liked baseball, which ones hated email, and which wives were actually making the purchasing decisions behind husbands who liked to pretend otherwise. I went in the opposite direction. I liked systems more than rooms. I liked problems that behaved according to rules even when the people inside them did not. At 26, after 3 years working in risk consulting for a hospital network, I quit and started Juniper Trace Consulting from the back room of a rented bungalow. I helped medical practices and small manufacturers meet cybersecurity and privacy requirements they barely understood. At first, my office was a folding table, 2 monitors, and a space heater that tripped the breaker whenever I ran the printer. My first serious client was a group of orthopedic clinics that discovered one morning that an employee had been sending patient spreadsheets to a personal email account. I spent an entire weekend tracing access, documenting exposure, coordinating counsel, and building a remediation plan that kept them from turning a serious incident into a catastrophic one. They referred me to a dental group. The dental group referred me to a laboratory. By the end of my first year, referrals were coming faster than I could answer them. I hired one analyst, then another. The person who made the little company feel real was Walter Briggs, a 59-year-old former county records supervisor who came in for what was supposed to be a part-time administrative job and immediately reorganized every contract, invoice, authorization, and vendor file I owned. Walter believed paper should be able to testify. That was his phrase. If 3 people remember something 3 ways, he told me during his first week, the document gets the last word. I loved him for that. By year 2, Juniper Trace had 27 clients on recurring contracts and 7 employees. We had moved into a narrow brick office above a kitchen supply store, and for the first time I was turning away work because I couldn't hire fast enough. That was when I made the mistake that changed my life. I accepted money from my father. The bank had approved a credit line, but it wasn't large enough to cover the 2 senior hires I needed plus new software licensing. I was short about $180,000. At Sunday dinner, my father listened while I explained the gap, wiped his mouth with a cloth napkin, and said, "Why pay strangers interest when there's capital sitting at this table?" I should have heard the word capital. Instead, I heard father. He offered the money through one of his business entities. His attorney drafted a convertible promissory note. I was not reckless. I had my own lawyer review it. She pointed out that my father could accelerate the unpaid balance under certain conditions, and if I could not satisfy the demand within 12 days, convert the balance into a controlling stake. I negotiated a prepayment provision and a release mechanism that would extinguish the conversion right once the principal was paid. My lawyer told me the agreement was aggressive, but not unusual. Then she said something I remembered too late. Contracts don't know who loves you. I signed anyway. My father shook my hand in his office and smiled. Now we both have skin in the game. I corrected him. You have debt in the game. The company is mine. He laughed as though I had made an ambitious child's joke. My mother, Diane, was sitting near the window writing thank you notes for a charity luncheon. She looked up and said, "Nobody is trying to take anything from you, Rachel." I hadn't accused anyone of trying. That should have bothered me more than it did. For the next 18 months, I paid the loan down faster than required. Every extra dollar that didn't need to go into payroll went toward principal. I kept the wire confirmations in a folder. Walter kept duplicate receipts in a locked cabinet. By early summer, the balance was under $70,000, and I had enough receivables coming in to clear it before fall. At the same time, my family's attitude toward Juniper Trace changed. My father started introducing me to people as our cybersecurity brain. Kendra began bringing prospects to my office without asking first. My mother told relatives that the girls were expanding the family into technology. Each time, I corrected them. Each time, the correction was treated as evidence that I was difficult. At one dinner, Kendra rolled her eyes and said, "You act like we're stealing your identity because Dad mentions you in a conversation." I act like the company has one owner because it does. Dad put his fork down. Technically, you have an investor, a lender. He smiled without warmth. See, this is why people find you exhausting. Every word has to be exact. He meant it as criticism. I took it as instruction. That winter, my father made a disastrous expansion decision. I didn't understand the full scale until years later, but I knew he had joined a redevelopment project involving an old distribution property south of town. The plan was to convert it into a mixed commercial complex. Permits dragged. An environmental problem surfaced. A partner stopped contributing cash. Construction costs climbed. At home, the signs were smaller. My mother started talking about everyone making sacrifices. My father stopped replacing company vehicles on schedule. Kendra's husband, Ethan Shaw, suddenly started spending more time with my father. Then Kendra announced she was launching a separate company called Shawline Technology Partners. The explanation was vague: managed IT, vendor coordination, digital services for local businesses. It overlapped with my work just enough to make my stomach tighten. "You don't do security," I told her after dinner. "We're not doing what you do." "What are you doing?" "Helping companies with technology." That describes everything from replacing keyboards to running cloud infrastructure. She sighed. "Not everything is about you." 2 weeks later, I saw a proposal she had accidentally left open on my parents' kitchen counter. It listed compliance support and managed security coordination. 2 phrases taken directly from my own service descriptions. I drove home and moved my loan payoff date forward. I also began backing up everything twice. The irony is that I was already afraid of the right people. I just misunderstood the timing. 3 months before the takeover, my father's office emailed an amendment to the note. It changed the insurance requirements because Juniper Trace had moved into a larger suite. 4 pages, routine language. My lawyer reviewed it. I signed the last page digitally using the signature image I used for internal business documents. I remember hesitating before clicking send. Not because I saw danger. Because I had become the kind of person who hesitated around my own father and hated myself for it. In August, 11 weeks before I planned to clear the balance, a courier delivered a demand letter to my office. The remaining principal, $68,400, was due in 12 days. If I failed to pay in full, the lender would exercise its conversion rights. I called my father before I finished reading the second page. He answered from his car. "You know I'm paying it off in October." "I know what the agreement says." "So do I. It also says I can prepay. And I can accelerate." "Why are you doing this?" There was a pause. Then he gave me the sentence that would become the sound of a locked door in my head. "Business doesn't stop being business because we share blood." I spent 12 days trying to find money faster than money wanted to be found. I asked my bank to expand the line. Denied. I tried another bank, too short a window. I called 2 clients and offered discounts for early annual prepayment. One agreed, but not enough. I sold my car and borrowed against my retirement account. I got within $12,000. On the last day, I offered my father every dollar I had plus interest and a written commitment for the remainder within 30 days. His lawyer rejected it. At 8:14 the next morning, I received notice that the debt had converted. My father's entity now controlled 58% of Juniper Trace. By noon, there was an emergency shareholder meeting. By 2, I was no longer chief executive of the company I had built. Kendra was appointed president. I remember almost nothing about the legal language. I remember the hum of the air conditioner. I remember a paper cup of water sweating onto the conference table. I remember Ethan sitting against the wall with his ankles crossed, as though he were attending somebody else's problem. Kendra kept looking down at her yellow legal pad. My mother sat beside my father. That surprised me. She had no formal role. She did not need to be there. But she was. When the resolutions were finished, I asked her one question. Did you know? She looked at my father before she looked at me. That was the answer. Dad stood and gathered the papers. You built something valuable, he said. You should be proud of that. I stared at him. He continued, almost gentle. But you built it with family money. You were never as separate as you wanted to believe. There are sentences that hurt because they are cruel. That one hurt because he thought it was reasonable. I walked out with a cardboard box containing my coffee mug, 2 framed certifications, a sweater, and a ceramic fox one of my employees had given me for Christmas. Walter had already been fired. I sat in my car for 40 minutes without starting it. I did not cry. For years, I thought that meant I was strong. Now I know I was in shock. The first crack in the official story appeared 3 weeks later. A client named Dr. Samuel Porter called my personal cell. He did not sound angry. He sounded disappointed, which was worse. I wish you'd told us yourself, he said. Told you what? That you were stepping away. I stood in the kitchen of my bungalow, holding a bowl I had forgotten to eat from. I didn't step away. There was a silence. Then he forwarded me a letter. It was on Juniper Trace letterhead. It thanked his practice for its confidence in me and explained that I had chosen to pursue opportunities outside West Michigan. It said all active agreements would transition to Shawline Technology Partners, where Kendra and her team would ensure continuity. At the bottom was my signature. Not a version of it. My signature. The same digital signature image I had attached to the insurance amendment. I called 2 more clients, then 5. By the end of the week, I had copies of 33 nearly identical letters. Everyone said I was leaving voluntarily. Everyone transferred the relationship to my sister's new company. Everyone carried my name. I had never writ a single sentence of them. That discovery did something the takeover itself had not. The takeover could still be forced into the language of contracts. Ugly contract, predatory timing, family betrayal hidden behind legal rights. The letters were different. The letters required someone to sit down and create a lie in my voice. I began asking clients to photograph the envelopes too. Most had thrown them away. 6 had not. 5 were addressed in a handwriting I recognized immediately. My mother S. Diane Donovan had written my name on lunch sacks when I was a child. She had labeled every Christmas ornament box in the basement. She wrote birthday cards with a narrow rightward slant and unusually round capital letters. I could have identified her handwriting upside down. For several days, I refused to identify it in my own mind. I told myself maybe Kendra had learned to write like her. Maybe someone in Dad's office had. Maybe the envelopes had been prepared for some unrelated mailing. Trauma can make a very intelligent person negotiate with obvious facts. I took everything I had to a lady, Gatian attorney in Lansing. She listened without interrupting. Then she explained the difference between knowing and proving. Copies from clients were useful, but originals were better. The actual source document for my signature mattered. Internal emails mattered. Draft files mattered. Metadata mattered. Witnesses mattered. Most of that evidence was now inside a business, controlled by the people I would be accusing. I could sue, she said. It would be expensive. It would be slow. The defense would argue that the client transition was authorized as part of the ownership change. They would make the dispute look like a bitter daughter objecting to a legitimate corporate restructuring. Can they win with that? They don't have to win cleanly, she said. They can make winning cost more than you can afford. I had $4,700 left after legal fees, rent, and the debts I had accumulated trying to save the company. My father had relationships with half the business community in the county. I had photocopies, a suspicion about handwriting, and no job. That was the first time in my adult life I understood that truth and power are not synonyms. By October, the story around town was already settled. Rachel had overreached. Martin had rescued the company. Rachel became emotional and left. Kendra stepped in to protect the clients and employees. My mother never publicly attacked me. She did something more effective. She allowed every false version to survive. When my Aunt Judith challenged her at a family birthday party, Mom reportedly said, "There are private details Rachel would not want discussed." That sentence was brilliant. It made silence sound like protection. Judith called me that night. My father's older sister had spent 35 years teaching high school history and had never mastered the family talent for polite dishonesty. "Your mother is making herself look gracious," she said. "I know. Do you want me to correct people?" I thought about it. Then I said no. I was already becoming someone I did not recognize. I slept with my phone under my pillow. I woke at 3 in the morning and checked bank accounts that had not changed. I reread the loan agreement searching for a sentence that would become different if I hated it enough. I moved to Seattle with 2 suitcases, a laptop, the ceramic fox, and a rolled-up blueprint from Juniper Trace's first real office. Walter had rescued it from a recycling bin after they fired him. It showed our original network layout, drawn in red and black marker with coffee stains in one corner. I kept it because it was proof of something the documents could not show. I had existed there. For the first year in Seattle, I worked contract incident response and compliance remediation for companies nobody remembers because nothing dramatic happened after I arrived. That is the strange thing about competent security work. Success often looks like the absence of a headline. I took overnight calls. I traveled on holidays. I slept in airport hotels and learned which coffee shops opened at 5. Vector Harbor began 2 years after I arrived in Seattle. Marcus joined first. He was an infrastructure engineer with the irritating habit of saying exactly what he thought. Tessa Monroe, a privacy specialist from Boston, joined 3 months later. We started in a subleased office above a physical therapy clinic and focused on security operations for mid-sized healthcare and logistics companies. I owned the controlling shares. Not because I refused to trust Marcus and Tessa, but because we designed the company intentionally. No hidden conversion rights, no personal loans, no handshake money, no family capital. Every founder right was documented. Every board power was explicit. Every financing round was reviewed by independent counsel. The first time Marcus saw the protective provisions in our bylaws, he whistled. "Who hurt you?" I looked at him. He stopped smiling. "Okay," he said, "not a joke." Years later, he became one of the first people I told the full story to. My mother began sending articles. She never mentioned Juniper Trace. She never apologized. She wrote things like, "Your father always said you were determined." My father had not called me once. Kendra sent birthday texts that read as if an assistant had drafted them. "Hope you're well. Big year for you. Take care." I replied with the same energy. "Thanks. Hope you're well too." That was our relationship for nearly a decade. Grammatical, blood-related, empty. Judith was different. She called every few months from Michigan and told me things no one else would. Dad's redevelopment project had ended in litigation. Donovan Facilities Group was smaller than it used to be. Shawline had absorbed most of Juniper Trace's clients after the takeover, but Kendra had struggled to keep the technical staff. Several clients left within 2 years. The medical group that had once been my biggest AC. Count finally moved to a national provider. The call that reopened everything came in September 2025. My attorney, Camille Rhodes, had handled Vector Harbor's corporate work for years. She knew I had once owned a company in Michigan, but she did not know most of the family history. She called at 6:40 one morning. "Does the name Shawline Technology Partners mean anything to you?" I sat up in bed. Yes. There, in a distressed credit package, we're reviewing for another client. I thought the name looked familiar from an old disclosure. I was fully awake. How distressed. Bank workout, probably asset sale if they can't refinance. I walked to the window. Seattle was still dark. When? Could be within months. I should have asked whether Kendra was going to lose the company. Instead, I asked, what happens to archived records in a sale? Camille went quiet. What kind of records? Old client files, email backups, corporate archives. That depends on the transaction. If the company liquidates, anything not legally required or commercially useful eventually gets destroyed. The room seemed to narrow around me. For 11 years, the missing proof had lived somewhere I could not reach. Now it was about to disappear permanently. I told Camille the entire story that morning. Not the polished version. It's everything. The loan, the acceleration, the shareholder vote, the letters, my mother's handwriting, the digital signature. When I finished, Camille said, "You want the archive. I want the truth. Those are different things. Then I want whatever gets me close enough to tell the difference." She reviewed the situation and came back 3 days later with an option I had not considered. The bank wanted a buyer. Shawline needed capital urgently. A private acquisition vehicle could purchase the controlling lender position and inject enough cash to prevent collapse. My name did not have to appear in day-to-day communications. We formed Cedar Row Capital. The name meant nothing. That was the point. By late October, Cedar Row acquired 74% of Shawline Technology Partners for just over $2 million and extended a $520,000 operating facility tied to payroll and essential vendors. Kendra retained 26% and remained chief executive pending review. She believed an investment group from the Pacific Northwest had saved her company. Technically, that was true. The transaction preserved 29 jobs. 9 belonged to people who had once worked for me. I told myself that was why I did it. It was not the whole reason. The archives were transported west in 2 shipments. Digital backups went to a forensic vendor. Physical records arrived in 37 sealed cartons. When the first pallets reached a secure storage room at Vector Harbor, I stood outside the door for almost a minute before entering. Marcus was with me. "You want company?" "No." He nodded. "You want me nearby?" That question almost undid me, because it was help without intrusion. "Yes." He left his office, door open across the hall. I spent 6 hours reviewing boxes, old payroll files, vendor agreements, tax records, insurance certificates, client renewals. Then, in a carton marked Legacy Correspondence, 2015, I found a red accordion folder. Inside were the originals of the 33 transition letters. I did not touch them immediately. My pulse became loud enough that I could hear it. I photographed the folder in place, logged the time, called Camille. Then I put on gloves and removed the first document. My signature sat at the bottom of the page. The same signature. I felt 27 again. For one ugly second, I was back in my old car outside Juniper Trace, unable to start the engine. Then training took over. Photograph. Catalog. Preserve. Under the letters was a printed internal checklist. Client name. Address verified. Letter enclosed. Contract copy enclosed. Follow-up assigned. 33 rows. Next to the heading was a handwritten note. Use Rachel's signature from insurance file. MD. My father's initials. I sat down on the floor. I had imagined finding proof for so long that I assumed proof would feel like relief. It did not. It felt like grief, finally receiving a birth certificate. There was more. In a side pocket of the accordion folder were 7 unused envelopes addressed in my mother's handwriting. Not similar. Not probably. Hers. One had a mistake in the street number, crossed out with the same tiny double line she used on grocery lists. My mother had not merely known something was happening. She had participated in the mailing. For 11 years, I had protected myself with a hierarchy of guilt. Dad did it. Kendra benefited. Mom was weak. That hierarchy let me keep one small room in my mind where my mother remained passive rather than dangerous. The envelopes emptied the room. I called Camille. I found them. All of them. And more. She came to Seattle the next day. The Digital Forensic Review produced the final pieces. An old mailbox backup contained a message from my father to Kendra and my mother, copied to an operations address. Subject, transition. The message was short. Have the client notices ready before the vote. Use the signature already on file. Diane can handle envelopes. Kendra, once controlled changes, call the top accounts personally so there is no gap. Beneath it was Kendra's reply. Are we sure Rachel agreed to this? My father answered 7 minutes later. Agreement is no longer the issue. Continuity is. Kendra replied with one word. Understood. I stared at that exchange longer than anything else. It did not absolve my sister, but it changed the shape of her guilt. She had known enough to ask. Then she had chosen obedience. My mother had not asked at all. Camille also tracked down Walter Briggs. He was 70 now and living near Asheville, North Carolina, with his second wife and an elderly beagle named June. When I called, he recognized my voice immediately. Rachel. I had not heard him say my name in 11 years. I began crying before I could answer. Walter had kept a copy of the transition checklist. He had taken it home the night before the takeover because, in his words, I didn't like the way your father's people were asking for records. He had also kept notes from a conversation he overheard in the office. He sent copies and later signed an affidavit describing what he knew. For the first time, the story existed somewhere outside my nervous system. It had documents, dates, names, instructions, witnesses. I thought that would free me. Instead, for 3 nights I barely slept. On the 4th night, I opened my laptop and wrote a plan for revenge. The plan was efficient. Remove Kendra, freeze discretionary spending, call the operating facility, sell the remaining client contracts, let Shawline collapse in public, send my parents copies of the evidence after the last employee had carried out the last box. I even wrote a draft message to my father. You taught me to read the contract. I stared at that sentence and felt sick. Not because the plan was illegal. Camille could have structured most of it perfectly. Because it sounded like him. I had spent 11 years becoming powerful enough that no one could corner me the way my father had. Somewhere along the way, I had confused power with the right to make other people feel cornered. 29 employees had not stolen from me. 9 of them had once trusted me. If I burned the business simply because I finally owned the match, I would not be correcting the family pattern. I would be proving I had learned it. I deleted the plan. The next day, Camille and I had a different conversation. Civil claims were complicated by time limits. Criminal theories were even less predictable. We could pursue legal review, but there was no clean promise of a courtroom reckoning more than a decade after the events. So the evidence may never be judged, I said. It can still be true without a judge, Camille replied. That sentence stayed with me. I asked her to research a worker ownership structure. She looked at me for a long moment. You spent more than $2 million getting control of this company. I know. And now, you want to transfer control to the employees. Yes. Are you sure this isn't another dramatic decision made in response to your family? No, I said. That's why I want you to draft it slowly. For 3 months, we built the structure. My shares would move into an employee benefit trust. The $520,000 operating facility would be forgiven. An independent board would oversee management. Kendra would not be guaranteed her job. The employees would decide whether she had earned it. I also created a separate education trust for Kendra's 11-year-old daughter, Sophie. Not because Kendra deserved a gift. Because Sophie deserved one piece of her future that no adult at our family table could leverage. While Camille finished the documents, Vector Harbor closed its largest financing round. The announcement valued the company at $1.12 billion. My photograph appeared in business publications. I used to read in airport lounges when I was broke. Old classmates contacted me. People from Grand Rapids who had accepted my father's version without questions sent messages saying they had always known I would do something big. I answered none of them. 11 days later, my mother texted, Sunday, 6 o'clock, don't embarrass us. Judith called that night. It's not a reunion, she said. Your father has been telling everyone the family needs to rally around Kendra's company. I laughed once. He wants me to invest. He wants you to rescue it. He thinks I don't know how bad it is. He thinks you became rich enough to become obedient again. That line hurt. Because it was accurate. I'm going, I said. I assumed you were. I'm not going to fight. Judith snorted. That worries me more. I flew to Michigan Friday night and stayed at a hotel downtown. On Saturday, I drove past the building where Shawline operated. Through the windows, I saw Kendra helping 2 employees move boxes near a conference room. She looked older than the sister in my memory. Tired, smaller somehow. I sat across the street and let myself hold 2 truths at once. She had accepted what was taken from me. She had also spent 11 years carrying the consequences of our father's decision. Context was not absolution. But I no longer needed absolution to be the price of accuracy. Sunday evening, I arrived at my parents' house at 5:47. The dining room looked almost unchanged from childhood. Polished oak table, framed family photographs, a brass chandelier my mother refused to replace because good things should last. There were 10 people present, my parents, Kendra and Ethan, Sophie, Judith, 2 cousins and their spouses. My father had seated me directly across from him. Of course he had. After dessert, Dad leaned back and folded his hands. There's something we should discuss as a family. Judith looked at me and then down at her coffee. My father began talking about legacy, about businesses built over generations, about how families survive hard seasons by keeping resources close. Then he arrived exactly where Judith predicted. Shawline, he explained, had valuable relationships but temporary financing pressure. Vector Harbor had capital, expertise, and scale. A combination could solve everything. You could bring Kendra's company under your umbrella, he said. Clean up the debt, protect the jobs, keep what we built together from leaving the family. What we built together. 11 years vanished. I felt my body preparing for an old response. Jaw tight, shoulders high, brain producing evidence faster than anyone had asked for it. I placed both feet flat on the floor. Then I turned to Kendra. Who owns Shawline right now? She blinked. Why? Just answer. Cedar Row Capital owns 74%. Dad frowned. Kendra continued. They came in during the bank workout. Do you know who controls Cedar Row? No. I opened the first case and placed the acquisition documents on the table. I do. Kendra stared at the signature page. Then she looked at me. No. Yes. Ethan leaned forward. My father took off his glasses. I said, Cedar Row is mine. I bought the lender position last fall. I own 74% of Shawline, and the operating money that kept payroll current came from me. Silence spread around the table. Then my father smiled. Actually smiled. Well, he said, almost relieved. Then this is easier than I thought. I looked at him. He spread one hand toward Kendra. You already protected the family business. Something inside me went still. That smile did what 11 years of therapy had not quite managed. It showed me, with perfect clarity, that there was no combination of facts that would turn him into the father I wanted. So I stopped trying. I didn't buy it for the family, I said. I lifted the red accordion folder onto the table. I bought it because this was inside. I removed one original transition letter and handed it to my cousin. Then another. Then the internal checklist. I placed the note with my father's initials in front of him. His expression changed. Kendra closed her eyes. My mother whispered, Rachel. I kept my voice calm. 33 clients were told I chose to leave. They were told I personally transferred their contracts to Kendra. I did not write those letters. I did not authorize them. My signature was copied from an insurance amendment. Dad pushed the checklist away. You're simplifying a complicated situation. No, I spent 11 years complicating it for you. I placed a printout of the archived email beside his plate. Here is your instruction to prepare the notices before you took control." Kendra started crying silently. I turned to her. "You asked if I had agreed." She nodded once. "And then?" "I let him answer for you." The room stayed quiet. "I'm sorry," she said. It was not enough. It was also the first true sentence she had given me in 11 years. Then I took out the unused envelopes and set them in front of my mother. She recognized her handwriting immediately. Her face collapsed. "I was trying to keep things from becoming uglier," she said. "You addressed the lie. Your father said clients needed reassurance. You knew I hadn't written the letters." She looked down. That was the answer. Dad stood. "I was trying to save everything. The redevelopment was bleeding money. The facilities company was exposed. Juniper Trace had value and Rachel had built it using capital I provided. I made a decision." "You made several," Judith said from the other end of the table. He ignored her. "You want everyone to think I'm a thief." I shook my head. "I'm done managing what everyone thinks of you." His face hardened. "Then what is this? Revenge?" I opened the second case. "For a while, yes." I took out the trust documents. I had the power to shut Shawline down. I wrote the plan. Then I realized destroying 29 livelihoods to punish 3 people would make me more like this family, not less. I signed the first page. Kendra stared at my hand. I signed the second. And the third. My 74% is now transferring to an employee ownership trust. The operating facility is forgiven. An independent board will oversee the company. Dad's face went blank. "You're giving it away." "I'm giving control to the people whose work kept it alive." "You paid millions for it." "Yes." "That's insane." "No. It's the first money I've spent that nobody at this table gets to control." I slid the packet toward Kendra. "You don't automatically keep your position. The board and employees will decide whether you should run the company." She wiped her face. "I understand." Then I placed a sealed envelope beside Sophie's plate. "This is for you, but not tonight. Your parents can explain it later. It's an education trust administered independently. Nobody in this room can borrow against it, redirect it, or use it as leverage." My father laughed once, without humor. "So now you're protecting a child from us?" I met his eyes. "Yes." That was the only moment all evening when I wanted to hurt him. I let the answer stand and did not add anything. My mother began crying. "After everything we did for you." There it was. The oldest family equation. Care offered in the past as a mortgage against obedience forever. I stood. I'm grateful for what was good. I'm also done pretending the good cancels the harm. Dad pointed toward the documents. "You came here to humiliate us." "No, I came because you spent 11 years telling a story about me in rooms where I wasn't present. Tonight I put the evidence in one of those rooms." I looked around the table. "I don't need anyone here to choose me. I don't need apologies tonight. I don't need agreement. But no one gets to repeat the story that I abandoned my company or my clients. You know better now." I picked up my case. My mother followed me to the front porch. It was cold enough that our breath showed. "Rachel, please," she said. "Don't make this permanent." I almost asked what this meant. The distance. The truth. The consequence. Instead, I said, "I'm not making a decision about forever. I'm making one about now." Her face changed. "What does that mean?" "It means no calls, no invitations, no messages through Judith, no articles in the mail. I need a life where contact with you is not the price of being considered a good daughter." "You're cutting off your own parents." "I'm stopping access. That is not the same thing as erasing you." She cried harder. For once, I did not move toward her. That hurt. Boundaries are often described as empowering. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they feel like standing outside in the cold while someone you love cries because you finally refused the role that kept both of you comfortable. I drove back to the hotel shaking. Not triumphantly. Not peacefully. My hands shook so badly, I sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes before I could use the room key. At midnight, Kendra texted. I knew the letters were wrong. I told myself Dad had legal control, so it wasn't my place. That was cowardice. I'm sorry. I won't ask you to forgive me. I read it 3 times. Then I wrote, "Take care of your employees. Give Sophie a different definition of family." That was all. 3 months later, the Employee Trust elected a 5-person board. Kendra was retained as general manager under a 1-year contract after the employees voted to keep her. She had to earn what our father once installed her into. Shawline was renamed Harbor Field Technology by the staff. At Vector Harbor, Marcus, Tessa, and I started a founder protection program that pays for independent legal review for women launching small technical businesses. No family lender gets to choose the lawyer. No investor gets to explain the contract privately. The old Juniper Trace blueprint hangs in my office now. For years, I kept it as proof that my first company had been mine. I don't need it for that anymore. Now it reminds me of something more useful. People can take a company. They can take clients. They can take your signature and paste it beneath words you never chose. They can even persuade a whole town to remember you incorrectly. What they cannot keep forever is your consent to their version of you. I used to think revenge would be the moment my father finally understood what he had done. It was. My real revenge, if you want to call it that, was refusing to become fluent. Tea in his cruelty, just because I had finally gained the power to speak it. My real recovery was smaller and harder. It was sleeping through the night. It was accepting dinner at Marcus's house without trying to calculate what I owed him for groceries. It was letting Tessa pick me up from the airport. It was learning that chosen family does not keep a private ledger of favors. It was discovering that no contact can be an act of honesty rather than punishment. And it was understanding, at 38, that dignity is not something a parent awards when you become successful enough. It is what remains when you stop submitting your life for their approval. If this story brings someone to mind, someone still trying to earn safety from people who only offer love with conditions, send it to them. Tell me in the comments what boundary changed your life. Subscribe for more stories about rebuilding after betrayal, and I'll meet you in the next episode.